I started out at Chadron State College and went a year and a half there and then dropped out because my cousin dropped out and he was my drinking partner. And so I didn't have anything to do there and joined the Navy. And when I got out of the Navy, I went back to UNL and got a master's degree in English. I'm influenced by the geography, the terrain, you know, seeing the flatness and especially out where I grew up, it's very spare out there, and I think that I spent a lot of time out on the farm just by myself and being really lonely, and so I think that the combination of that vast sky and influenced my sense of not having control of anything. So in my writing, well, I think the way that I talk is pretty much the way that I write, and so I got that from my mom and dad, so I have them to thank for that. And also, they both really loved language, and to the day that they died, each of them could do those puzzles in the newspaper in like 3 seconds. And as far as, I suppose my biggest influence in writing has been Greg Kuzma, because I studied with him at Nebraska, and that's where I took my first poetry writing class, and he encouraged me, and the rest is history. Well, read The Grapes of Wrath on my own in high school, because at the time when I was going to high school, it was mainly, they were kind of like riot control for the nuns, you know, and so they kind of herded us into a corner and pointed guns at us and stuff, and just to keep us under control. I'm just joking. They actually just used whips. And so I'd sneak off to the library. When I was a senior, I had completed everything because I kind of dropped out of the fast track and took the slow track, and so I read The Grapes of Wrath, and I finished that, and I said, man, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I got my notebook out, and I didn't know what to write. And so I realized I had to set off, you know, and have all kinds of adventures to have something to write about. But that sort of never really happened because I'm a big chicken. So I didn't want to jump out of any airplanes or anything like that. So there was a number of years where I felt real driven to write, and like I didn't feel complete and didn't feel like I was a full human being unless I was writing, because it became very vital to me. And after the first 10 or 12 years, that kind of wears off a little bit, but I continue to write because it fulfills some sort of need in me. So it's how I figure things out, I guess. But I don't panic anymore if I go a day without writing a poem. Sometimes I can go a month without writing a poem, and then I'll have a streak where I'll write for, you know, every day for weeks at a time, and so it just depends. You know, I've been thinking about that ever since I read the question, and I don't know. I just write about things that happen in my daily life, so I guess you could say that that's what inspires me. I don't. I think most young writers have the experience of, especially poets, of getting, or probably fiction writers too, of getting lines, you know, of having these words come up, and you think, wow, that is really great, and you have to rush and get it down and on the paper before you forget it, and that happened for a number of years, and then it kind of, after a while, goes away. But then if you keep writing. And that's I guess inspiration. After a number of years, though, if you just keep writing, that doesn't happen. But you kind of got your tools sharpened, and what you write comes out pretty good anyway, whether it's inspired or not. You know, I have probably about 4 main topics: family. My brother's death. He was killed in a car crash when I was 16, so that was a sore spot for a number of years. Certain times I've written a lot about my work. I don't write that much about it now because it's the kind of work I'm doing in social services is kind of more congruent with my personality than some other jobs I've had. So I'm not always having that tension against, the job I do and the life I really want to lead, which I still haven't figured out what that is yet. But so other topics are mainly just family and what happens every day, that kind of stuff. And birds and animals, that kind of stuff. I enjoy writing about other things that we sometimes take for granted. But usually I'm not a good morning person, so I have had times where I decided I'm going to get up and I'm going to write every morning, because that's like what William Stafford did. He got up every day and wrote for an hour for 45 or 50 years. And but I'm just not a morning person. I did that a couple different times, and I ended up having these really weird, angry. I needed my sleep, I guess, and I don't get much of it anyway. So, because I stay up late at night and write, and I write really weird, angry poems at night. So, I don't know. But the main thing is I just try to eke out a little time someplace and write during the day, every day. I don't look at myself as writing for an audience. I just write because I'm hopelessly self-absorbed, and so I'm just writing to figure stuff out as it comes up, and to try and capture it. A lot of the things I've written about my kids over the years, they really like to go back and read them. And friends of ours ask them, "Doesn't that embarrass you to have this poem about you, whatever it was about?" And they say, "No, it really." My son said one time, "No, it really makes me love my dad a lot more." So that was kind of nice. I don't know. When I started writing years and years ago, I had this sense that if any person does any artistic endeavor, if they write about what happens in their life, they're sort of writing about everybody else and what happens in their lives too. So there's a lot of controversy about people that write, poems that are all about I, versus writing them in the third person. But I don't, and people that, some people feel that that's just, solipsistic and all you're concentrating on is yourself. But to me, I'm writing about the rest of the human race when I write about myself, because I'm part of the human race. And at least so far, I haven't been kicked out yet. Well, it's fun to write, and you get a real sense of accomplishment. It's great when you get your first poem published in a little magazine someplace. It's great when your first book comes out. I remember back when I was a student at UNL back in the 70s and thinking, man, I'll never see my name on the spine of a book. That'd be the most incredible thing, And now that it's happened, it's really neat. And so I guess if I had advice, it would be, if you feel like doing it, go for it. Nobody's forcing you, and you can always quit and do something worthwhile. And if you feel like you're going to be a novelist, I would work on being a novelist rather than a poet, because at least maybe you can support yourself with that. Poets are born sad and die poor. Probably the same old stuff. I'm just going to keep drubbing myself to death. Actually, I've really wanted to write some novels over the course of the years, but it's too much like work. You have to actually put in the time every day and knock out a certain bunch of words. And I kind of do that anyway, but it's every day when you write a poem, it's like starting up again. You have to start with a fresh page and a fresh idea. And with a novel, I think it would be good to you can go back to what you started out, and maybe you wouldn't have to kickstart yourself every day. As far as what, I don't work with plans, or I don't set out a series of poems or something that plan on doing and writing about, the homestead or whatever. I've tried that before and it just doesn't seem to work for me. So I write whatever. I kind of like, my theory is that there's poems that are kind of floating around all the time, and you just have to snag them. Well, my latest book just came out just before the Nebraska Book Festival. We've always been coming to this morning from Sandhills Press. And I had a book come out the year before, Some Hero of the Past, from WordPress. And like I was telling you, I was sort of surprised to see that in the last 10 years I've published nine books or chapbooks of poems. So almost, yeah. So I'm the world's most widely known poet, or widely known unknown poet, or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, what I'm going to read is just, I'm going to start by reading 3 poems, since we're just past Veterans Day, about a couple veteran friends of mine and then, or acquaintances of mine. And then I'm going to read like 2 poems from each one of my books. And if nobody has committed suicide by the end of 45 minutes in the audience, then I'll consider it was successful. And so I just tried to pick out, a few of the poems. Some of the poems that I don't read as often, maybe, to try and get some other ones out of the closet, and shake them off and let people.
Good evening. Thanks for coming this evening. My name is Meredith McGowan, and I am the curator of the Heritage Room. And I'd like to welcome you to the Heritage Room and to the John H. Ames Reading Series. The reading series has been in existence for more than 20 years, which we're pretty excited about. And in fact, tonight we're going to host the 172nd reading. And I'm glad you're here to enjoy it. So thanks for coming. We are here in the Jane Pope Geske Heritage Room of Nebraska Authors, and it is a special representative collection dedicated to promoting and preserving works about and by Nebraska authors. And there are about 13,000 volumes in the room. About 3,000 authors. So, and then obviously other things too, paintings on the walls and carvings by Paul Johnsgaard and other things too that are interesting to look at. I did want to point out, behind me here there is a display about Loren Eiseley. 2007 was kind of a big year for Loren Eiseley. It was the 100th anniversary of his birth and the 30th anniversary of his death. So there was a celebration earlier in September, and the display is still here, so that's something you might want to look at too. So you're welcome to come back anytime that we're open. We are open Tuesday through Friday from 12 to 3 and Sundays from 2 to 5, so we'd welcome your visit anytime. We'd also like to thank the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association. We're able to bring special programs like these to you through an endowment established by their volunteer efforts over the years. Tonight our reader is Greg Kosmicki. We talked about his name, Kosmicki, but he is Greg Kosmicki. He is a social worker, I believe, by trade in Omaha, and he does have another life, though. He's a poet, an editor, and a publisher, I believe. He has a BA and an MA from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He has published poetry in a number of publications over the years, and he's published a number of books of poetry too. 9, I think, in the last 10 years, he said. The most recent ones are entitled Some Hero of the Past, and the most recent, kind of hot off the press, I believe, We Have Always Been Coming to This Morning. As an editor and a publisher, Greg, along with Mary Kay Stillwell, recently produced Nebraska Presents, an anthology of poetry, which features 82 contemporary Nebraska poets. And I think we have quite a few of them in this room here too with us, don't we? We were pleased to have Greg and many of the other poets read in the Heritage Room recently for the Nebraska Book Festival late in October, so that was a great day too. We're glad to have Greg here with us, and I hope you'll help me welcome him. There's the new book, and here's Nebraska Presents too. So
Thanks, Meredith.
I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Got my lunch bag full of poems here. Well, thank you all for coming. When Roy showed up about quarter till and it was only Roy, I said, whoa, another one of those nights. And it's not blustery or anything out there either, so that's kind of bad, actually. Should be.
Reading it down.
Yeah, there is too. Yeah, see, I probably outdrew that guy too, I bet. So, well, as I was going through to prepare my reading the other day, I didn't get a lot of time. I didn't get time to time my reading, so I'm going to be sort of winging it in that aspect. But I did realize that I've got, like I told Meredith, that I published 6 chapbooks and 3 books of poems in the last 10 years, which is quite a bit. And so I thought what I'd like to do is just go through and read a poem or 2 from each one, and then maybe concentrate and read 3 or 4 from my most recent book at the end. I would like to start out with, since we just passed Veterans Day, with a couple poems about veterans with whom I've been acquainted from my hometown. One of them, by the name of Ray Coker, was a Medal of Honor winner in Vietnam, and as you guys are probably aware, most Medal of Honor winners don't come back to receive their awards. Or I should say Ron Coker. Ray is Ron's brother. Ron Coker was born in 1947, died in 1969, and he received the Medal of Honor for, he went out into a field of fire, dragged back 2 of his comrades that were injured across this withering fire. A hand grenade landed in their midst. He threw it back. Later, another hand grenade landed, and he pulled it in, and it blew him up. So he saved his buddy's life. But when I knew him, it was just kind of slightly in alliance, and he went to Chadron State College, too, where we both went. And when they put the annual together, the guy that was doing the annual, who I won't mention his name, but when he didn't know somebody's name, he would just make up some obscene name and put it in for the people's names. So I can tell you some of those names later when we're not in mixed company. Anyhow, so at least with Ron's entry in the annual, it didn't come out with his name and picture wrong anyhow. It's called Annual, to the memory of Ron Coker. I was looking through an annual yearbook, how's that for redundancy, and saw myself as I was 35 years ago, and all the others, too, who are all now pushing 60. And the funny thing was that there wasn't any funny thing. We were almost all of us dumb-looking, square-headed, pimply slobs in black frame Clark Kent glasses, and the girls were of 2 distinct types. Ones with pixie hairdos, and the girls just off the ranches with their hair like old saddle blankets and still wearing cat-eye glasses. The war in Vietnam was just reaching the year before Tet, and there was the picture of the kid from the ranch out north of our farm who a couple years later threw himself down on a grenade to save a Marine Corps buddy. I know where he's buried, up in Fairview Cemetery by his folks' place with his Medal of Honor. The annual has his hometown wrong, like half the entries, but they got his name and picture right. The other poem I'd like to read about a veteran is about a guy that I knew by the name of Clyde Gillespie. And Clyde got kicked out of the service after he served in Vietnam because he knocked out an officer over in Vietnam and punched him out. So anyway, Clyde, oddly enough, got transferred to the Naval Hospital where I was stationed working on Vietnam vets. And we got together one last time. And this poem is called Agent Orange for Clyde Gillespie. You come back with a broken fist by medevac from the bush to clean ortho, 3 East. I'm stationed on 3 West, dirty ortho, cleaning and debriding wounds. Corpsman says, a grunt on 3E says he's from your hometown. I come over on break time. You're there 2 days, then booted out. A euphemistic, less than honorable discharge. in a less than honorable war. We never got together like we said. One time at college a couple years before, though you barely knew me, you took care of me, drunk, slobbering about my dead brother. Last thing I heard, you were back in our hometown, dead of cancer at 27. But hell, you know that's not true. Last night you were with me again, after poetry and beer. Still had your crew-cut brown hair. And as you spoke, I remembered your gentleness. That night I was wasted and broken, drinking buddies sick of my wailing. Heard your husky smoke voice as you retold the story from the 3 East Ward. How you broke your fist, cold cocking that 0 in Nam. Showed me again the right uppercut that did it, got you that white cast and the discharge. Saw again your Jesus Christ brown eyes. And then I would like to read I guess what could be classified as an anti-war poem. It's called My Flag. It is after dinner and I go out to shake the crumbs from the tablecloth. They fall down onto the porch steps for the crickets and the mice and the ants. We live in a great country. There is enough for all. The tablecloth unfurls lightly on the held breath of the still fall night air. And it seems to me to be like a flag with the blue stripe all around the border and the blue stripe enclosing the field at center, a field that encloses some flowers, but could not hold in even all the flowers, since some of them have escaped and drifted, as on water or a breeze, toward the bright blue border. It is the flag of the friendly country where even the vermin have enough to eat, and I'm waving it from my porch for everyone. I want you to come and join me and my family. I want you to sit at my table and have bread and lasagna with us, so we can talk about the war and the taxes. I want you to help me shake crumbs on the porch. I want to wash it and iron it and fold it safely, to place it gently and with respect in the drawer for our next dinner when we will not have marched under any other flag. For I know you could not be a traitor to me. We will all be so insanely happy we had not yet had to die for any cause. I want you to spill your wine. I want you to get breadcrumbs on my flag. This is my first little book published by Brady Press over in Omaha. It's hand-set letterpress with fine papers, and I gave a copy of this to my parents, and it's got some bad words in it, and if there is such a thing. My mom and dad, my dad took me aside and said, "You know, Greg, we can't have that book in the house." And I said, "Oh, give it back." And so my mom says, "Well, can't we just block out the bad word with a magic marker?" And I said, "No, you can't." This poem is called How Things Happen, and it's 3 little shorter poems that, on Greg Kuzma's suggestion, I stuck together to make one short poem. First, one longer short poem. The first poem is called Belly Button. Child in my wife's womb. All day we picked zucchini, cucumbers with dried flowers at the growing end. Looked at muskmelons, yellow watermelon flowers. Oh, we will pluck you when you have ripened. August 19th. On our 4th anniversary, mild night of another good rain, you lie in bed near sleeping, immersing yourself in then the room and what the deepening and flowing of your breathing brings. Thunder in the south again, and in your womb our 3-month child turns in watery sleep, goggle-eyed, while outside among damp grass and ferns, the crickets and the peepers sing. 3. How Things Happen. A winter afternoon, I'm washing dishes, looking out the window. Debbie's nursing our boy. Snow slides from the tin roof of the tool shed. This is a a longish poem. The bad thing about having a long mustache like this is that I have never been able to drink anything without spilling it all over the place. So, for the last 35 years. Sunday afternoon and night. I have been in the house all day reading. Sometimes I got up and looked at the birds. I took them and the dogs food and water. I watched the dogs wrestle. I watched the squirrels and the blue jays feed. Then the sparrows. The sun was chilly when I got the funnies from the mailbox in the morning. I slept in late. I watched the shadows change, lengthen, disappear, turn into pink, orange, red, and dark. My wife went to bed. She was sick all day. I started this. We had tuna, corn, beans, and carrots for lunch. The furnace went on and off. I thought I should be writing poems. It was too cold to go out up in my study. I stayed downstairs and read some. I looked at the New Yorker. I looked at the Colossus. That got a laugh when I read it at the university years ago. I have a paper to do on Plath and Dickinson. My wife irritated me with her demands, but she is too good to have that bother for long. She went to bed early because she was sick. I talked to my brother on the phone. He's not coming down to stay before Thanksgiving. I have to tell him we're not coming home for Thanksgiving either. I tell my mother I have a paper to do on Milton. The dogs bark off and on all day. They seem to bark for no reason at thin air. I worked on some other poems. I thought of the laundry and the dryer in the basement. I thought of a short story. It would be about pheasant hunting sometime when I was 16 or 17. Not long after my brother got killed. I went with my father as usual. We got to the hunting shack of my uncle's early in the morning in heavy fog. We don't talk along the way because we don't have much to say. The hunting shack is blue-gray in the heavy early morning fog. Snow is falling. I flash forward to a brilliant pheasant while stepping out of the car and drawing my gun from its place on the seat. The pheasant flies crossways in the wind in the late afternoon sun, and I raise my gun. I see perfectly into its yellow eye. It is at least my 100th pheasant. This doesn't hurt anymore. I'm walking through thick snow toward the hunting shack and hear my uncle's and my cousin's voices through the walls. I look to my left where my father, in his dry grass-colored canvas pants and his green down jacket, places his gun against the wall. We go inside. Uneasy at their jokes on me, I think of my brother's ease among them last year. I go on and laugh at their jokes. Outside, the wind is howling and the dogs whining, their paws already cracked and bleeding in the bitter cold. Outside here, the wind blows also, though not as cold. And I thought all afternoon of a painting I would like to do. A blank white canvas with a single 2-inch wide stripe across it from left to right. Light green, like the color of a hospital waiting room. The paint dripping carelessly down. And the golden pheasant brilliant in the sun. And me walking with the red sun through the trees. A dog barking off somewhere in the distance. Up to my knees in the heavy blue snow. And younger or older, but still no place to go. This is a book called Nobody Lives Here Who Saw This Sky, which some of my friends perverted into Nobody Lives Here Who Saw This Guy. You know? like the Jimi Hendrix, excuse me while I kiss this guy, you know. This is a kind of a love poem for the two little old ladies that lived next door to us and for our son, called Daffodils. How he, so eager to clamber the stone fence by the shed, back into our yard, where 9 forlorn daffodils have grown gracefully from a dead woman's flower bed, through 7 inches of last fall's fill dirt, to blossom this spring in my landscaping, picks one daffodil too close to the bloom for her to treat it as anything but a rose, floated in her crystal bowl in water. How she, homely old lady with a goiter, whom he expects at any moment to transmogrify, married to her sister and mother, accepts the blossom from this slip of a boy, graciously as though it's her first bouquet, who tends in her garden enough flowers for him to pick in his child's clumsy way his whole lifetime of neighbors and lovers. He always thought the two little old ladies next door, the Weesey sisters, were going to turn into witches. The neighbor dog. The title sort of segues into the poem. The neighbor dog lives in a cage, sleeps on cement inside a wooden doghouse. It is a large dog, a St. Bernard, barks at anything, barks now at 1:45 in the morning, barks whenever he hears someone or something moving in the alley. Nothing there but dirt and garbage cans and fences. Awakened maybe by a dream to bark at something that is not there, he'll spend his life barking and running in circles. I try to be friendly, but he's barked at me every morning and every evening for the last year when I walk by on my way to and from work. I wish he would at least recognize me after all this time. Why does he refuse when his cage borders mine? I hated working for UPS. This poem is called The Hanging Man. A man gets married. Then he goes outside and climbs up on his roof. A minor bank officer comes by and nails him to the roof. His wife comes out 3 times a day and feeds and waters him. At night, sometimes she comes out and they copulate. They have children. The children come out and play in the yard. The man can watch them. He hangs by nails driven through his hands and feet. At first, he doesn't like this. Then he realizes he couldn't live any other way. He begins to like hanging there. At least he has a job. It could be worse. People come by to look at him. They pay his wife a quarter, 50 cents at night when she's up there. He becomes known as the hanging man. He develops a reputation in his community, then statewide. Eventually, a TV crew comes out, and he gets an article about himself and people. He can't understand what all the fuss is about. He's just an ordinary guy. All I do is hang around the house, he jokes to time. One day, a man from the bank came by and removed the nails from the man's hands and feet. But he had been hanging there so long he can no longer stand. He drags himself into his living room and sees his children are gone. He searches through the rest of the house and sees his wife is gone. He wants to go back up to the roof, but the bank says, "No, you don't have to. You've paid for this house." He becomes despondent and kills himself accidentally while trying to climb back up to his nails. Since he had signed no will, a new young man from the bank comes by the next day and nails another young man to the roof. Yes, I felt trapped in my mortgage. This is a little book with poems about our son Mark. And I'll read one poem from this called The 3-Minute Egg. This has got small text. I don't know if I can read that or not. The 3-Minute Egg for Mark. And then anyway, I wasn't a rabbit, but I'm practicing. So, your mom and I left the house as soon as the water broke. The little flood announcing your arrival to the bedroom floorboards that needed a good scrubbing anyway. Debbie'd had a hard day at work teaching. I had been at school with my head in the usual cloud. We came home and had a roast cooking in some of that awful rusty water we had out on the farm with a bunch of spuds and carrots. We were going to do exercises when you decided to do some of your own a month early and join us where we stood in our farmhouse bedroom at the end of a day at the beginning of our life with you. Today, about 19 years later, you call me from your house where you have moved with your friends and try to be nonchalant as you always do. And then you get to the point, just as you always do. You always interrupt to say, "So what's your point?" Just as you did on your first night. We drove the icy moon-covered road to the room where good old Dr. Nazi would deliver you into the presence of the first bad joke you would hear. Then we, your new mom and dad, came home days later to roast rotted on the stove and all the delicious potatoes and carrots in that funky water. Your point, which was to ask, you who hate to ask anything, who would not even let me show you how to use a broom when you were 2, how to cook a soft-boiled egg. And so I tell you, and you're surprised it takes such a short time. Perhaps you thought adulthood was more difficult to control than this. I tell you, yes, I think it's what they call the 3-minute egg. We tell each other we love one another and hang up the phones. I finish lunch by myself in the kitchen, reading a book of poems. In the 9th house we have lived in since you were born. Get into the 14th car we've had to buy since then. Drive back to the 6th full-time job I have held since that night. But what I didn't tell you is, it really takes longer than that. This next book is Tables, Chairs, Walls, Window. Both those that, For My Son in a Motel Room, Tables, Chairs, Wall, Window, were from Sandhills Press. Mark Sanders published a little chapbook series called Main Traveled Roads. And then he also published my most recent book, too. Good old Mark Sanders. West of Grand Island. This book mainly concerns my mom getting dementia and being hospitalized against her will and a bunch of that stuff. So, west of Grand Island. We are driving towards sunset through sky peppered with geese that are always there, but you just can't see. You can't see them until you move through time and space, through air, through some life, to the place where they poke through. Pinpricks of dark light on the purple-orange crazy of sunset. Then there they are, and you know this is another miracle you're witnessing, sure as dawn, sure as sunset, sure as hurtling through space on the planet, hurtling through space. Sure as your mother rose up one day to lie down, to press you out from between her thighs, her love. Sure as where you see them then, spread obscenely before you hours later, where she lies in the hospital, recovering poorly from surgery, unaware she is there, unaware you are there because she is ill in her mind, unaware these geese had landed in a small puddle outside Grand Island, that you and your wife and her granddaughters had seen them as they drove through time, disguised as air, seen them as if on a signal rise, 10,000 wings, raising dark bodies out of black water into the waning light. This is a little book called Greg Kosmicki's Greatest Hits from Pudding House Publications. And I'll read one poem from here. It's called Deodorant. And I read one Mark poem. This is an Audrey poem. Deodorant. Getting old. Deodorant. Audrey comes down the stairs crying. This time it's antiperspirant in the left eye. She can't believe how stupid she is. We put her under the tap, but the chemicals she wears to hide the fact she is actually human, made of sweat, grease, oils, dirt, will not flush out so easily. These ones are guaranteed, I think, for 14 hours to keep from letting anyone see that inside this skin she lives in like an advertisement for 100 different products is only a little girl, my 14-year-old daughter, who can't understand how she could do this feat. The amazing Audrey will now place antiperspirant directly into her open eye. Any more than she is able to understand, she says, how that morning last winter it came to pass that I must rescue her like a person in space tangled in her life support system from her hot comb by cutting away her hair, her golden hair, like tiny strands of rope furiously knotted to the core of absurdity, so that when each one eventually was scissored in two, she was able to drift back to me, happy again, embarrassed and free. We sluice her eye, but the antiperspirant is stronger than the universal solvent, so we settle finally upon Visine. We sit together on the steps, she in her golden, almost a woman's body, I in my old man fat, and I see the two lines that run across her forehead like the ones in mine from laughing and crying. See how much even in our faces we are tied together, and put the drops into that fragile place from where she looks out at me, where light comes into her body. This little book is called The Patron Saint of Lost and Found, and there actually is a patron saint of Lost and Found. If you know anything about Catholicism, there's a patron saint for everything. So this is a little love poem for Debbie. It's called Upon Sitting by an Open Window While Away from You. And the text in here is really tiny, or I just got really old all of a sudden. When you hear a lone goose go by at night, making its single cry, think of us and how much we have meant to each other. Before you turn over and turn out the light, and let your magazine filled with ways to get slim and recipes for chocolate cake fall out of your hand onto the hardwood floor, as when I have come in, often late, at night to lie down beside you, to hear the movement of your breath for the first time again. This is a poem about my brother. It's called Crossing Orchard Street. And this was 30 years after he died. Somewhere on that street is the house where my brother lived almost 40 years ago. And in that house there is the closet where his clothes hung. Someone had to go in and remove, take down to the Salvation Army. And in the kitchen is the drawer that held one or two utensils he'd bought by that time, having lived with friends in apartments the last 3 years or so. Maybe a can opener, a spatula, butcher knife, vegetable grater, sure, a church key or two, and some forks. So a church key is a beer opener, in case anybody in here is too young to. Some things probably his housemate kept, at least for a while, to use in his next apartment, wherever he went since that night they rolled together in the Volkswagen and only one lived. If he still has it, he takes the knife or the can opener to slice a tomato or open a can of peaches, pauses for just a second, then sees where the chromium has not flaked away or rust eaten away the steel, how it glints again in the sun. And my penultimate book, I use that's the second time I got to use that word, Mary Kay. This little poem is called Bee. The other day at work, I took a walk at break and saw a bumblebee lying on the sidewalk. I moved it with my foot to see if it was alive. I flipped it onto its back, not on purpose, and saw its legs row the air like a capsized boat. Black and yellow like a fuzzy road sign, it must have been hit by a passing car. I decided to walk around the block and see if it had righted itself and flown away. It hadn't. I wondered what kind of pain it was going through, floating on the concrete, a sea of pain. I wondered what it could have been thinking, if it could remember its morning when it had left the hive, the flowers it had bumbled from and to. Or was its only thought, if it could have a thought, pain? I stepped on it and cried out its name, or would have, if passers-by would not have thought me insane. This is a longer poem called Earth Smell. It's about my usual occupation, going to the post office to mail poems. Earth smell. A certain smell rises from the ground at dusk and a little beyond, then lasts into the evening. That earth smell, no other way to put it, the smell of earth, full of God knows what all, contagion and filth. It rots and dries and becomes the earth smell, the sweetest smell on earth. I caught it coming in the back gate tonight, early fall, early dusk, just come back from the post office. Mom and Dad still alive, though not well. Most everyone I know declining, except the kids, of course, who still seem to be putting on new cells. Our youngest, our girl, almost 13 now, still growing. Most of the rest of us, well, I'd rather not say. I look in the mirror at a fat old guy that no amount of exercise will resurrect. Hair going, jowls sagging. I pick a blackhead off the side of my cheek like I did this afternoon as I sat in the dining room at the dining room table writing. What the hell could I possibly be writing, and why? The evening still came on later, and I still drove down to the airport post office and mailed out some stuff after waiting in line for about 20 minutes. While some guy had the postal clerk make out 6 money orders for him, and his money order machine wasn't working right, and the guy in line in front of me got all pissed off. Why in the hell can't you guys get someone out here and open another line? And that poor son of a bitch behind the counter who doesn't have anything to do with it, working Sunday night to support his kids wherever they are, saying, sorry, sir, one clerk's on lunch. A few minutes later, the clerk, who smiles a lot, comes out, but the line still hardly moves. Sunday night and the one PO open in town, and the guy's PO'd because some other guy has to send all his kids money because he couldn't keep his act together enough to stay with his kids, and the machinery's breaking down just like it's always breaking down. And the guy in front of me's pissed. Like me and the other 7 people aren't standing in line. Like we're getting any younger. Back outside there's a magnificent sunset, and I drive west listening to the stereo. Some Starlight Waltz music, you know those FM stations? Some Starlight Waltz music, the guy says, by some guy I've never heard of. But I'm glad for him and me that he wrote this music that is 7 minutes long, to watch stars come out by, to drive back home by, to smell the earth smell by, and to breathe it in. And now, I've got about 10 minutes, so I can torture you guys longer than I thought I was going to. I like to write poems about objects in our life. First, I want to read one, though, to equalize it out, so in case Audrey or Mark or Brianna ever watch this video, which I seriously doubt, that here's a poem that's got Brianna in it. And it's about being depressed and being a jerk, and then having Brianna sort of making me see what I don't see. It's called Peanut Butter. Just back from a walk, dropping sweat on the wooden floor, Brianna's on the couch. It's a hot night. She can't get to sleep. Debbie's finishing up some dishes since she can't read in the TV room in the recliner because the light keeps Brianna awake. I pat her a bit. No good. I'm irritable, toss the couch pillows onto the floor with a pop when she flips one of them over onto my sweaty body. I can't believe how angry I get these days over petty stuff. She fusses around, can't get comfortable. In my leaden state, I finally realize it's the heat. Ask her if the fan's getting to her. Hardly, she says. I find an extension cord, plug it in, get the fan closer to her. Ah, Daddy, that's wonderful, she says. I talk to Debbie in the kitchen. 2 or 3 minutes later, Brianna's asleep. I put in some laundry, clean the bathroom floor, come to the kitchen to do this hot and cold water therapy for my eye, hoping it will heal faster. This is one of my few quiet times to think. Going to work every day, I hardly get a chance. All I can think about is getting the kids where they have to go, getting ready for work, going to work, running errands, being at work, coming back from work. Weekends, I barely recover. Sunday nights, start thinking about work again. Stop me if any of that sounds familiar. This is what happens. 2 mornings ago, I didn't even notice when Brianna sat with me at the table with 2 slabs of toast, a jar of Super Crunch Skippy, and a knife, and smeared peanut butter all over the bread. The miracle of that. I like to write a lot of poems about the little animals that live around us, and this poem is called Cricket Redo, because there's a few poems before this called Cricket. Every time I find a cricket in the house, I put my hand around it, and it jumps around trying to get away, but as soon as it's in my hand, it becomes still, as though it trusts me. It seems comfortable in my hand. I carry it to the door to outside, and when I open up my hand, the cricket does not want to get off. It is content to stay there in my hand. I think I'm the St. Francis of Assisi of crickets. I like their little brownish black bodies like a pair of worn-out old shoes, and their funny little antennae that stick out all over the place like little cop cars or mobile army command units. I like it that they like me enough to stay in my hand. I would start a traveling circus for crickets, but I don't think that I'd make enough money at it to support my family, and then my wife and I would argue over it, and she would leave me. She would take the kids, and then I wouldn't get to see them again, except on weekends when I came to visit. I would be so weak by then from sorrow, any one of them, even the youngest, would have to pick me up off the floor and carry me outside like a cricket in her hand. I am not cute and black, and I don't have any antennae. I would sit in a room all day. I would sit in a room all day, hidden in some corner, but I wouldn't be able to rub my hands or legs together to make music. I would be no good as a cricket. So I guess I will not start a cricket circus. Besides, it would be demeaning to get to the crickets to have to wear little suits and be hitched onto tiny wagons. I don't think that a cricket would do that. They have more self-respect than that, I bet. I bet you can't even find a cricket that will pull a wagon anymore. You can just find the ones that sing all night. They are a bunch of great singers, those crickets. They are one great song of the earth, one great song about something you can hold that will seem to like you and forgive you. Gentle reader, you could go downstairs right now and find a cricket and pick it up and carry it in your hand. Most people go down and get them with the spray. And this is an object poem. Like I said, I like to write about things that are in our lives that we disregard a lot. This is called the microwave, because they sort of have lives of their own too. At work one day last week, the microwave quit. Lots of us did not believe it. We all had to come in and make our official tests. Mine was green tea that came out cold. Somebody else tested old pizza. Diagnosis the same. Then the ones who thought it might just be a fuse or loose wire had their try. The screws came out, the side lifted up like somebody's ribs when they open your chest. The fuse was fine, and nobody could even find a wire. Diagnosis still the same. Our course of action determined. One of us went around to collect $5 from each one of us, from each user.
just like we do when somebody's family member dies. An ad hoc committee was formed, decisions made on the place with the best deal, price range, features, and color. The new one arrived in its cardboard egg. The white came out, and the part we saved, the gray-black electronic yoke, came out to rest on the freshly scrubbed counter, which no one had realized till then had not been cleaned in maybe 7 years. I picked up the old one, and someone said, since I held it in my arms, I may as well take it to the dumpster. The contractors have on the lawn frozen into the spring snow. Somebody had checked, and it's okay. We can throw stuff into their dumpster. So I heaved it, and it made a perfect curve in the air in the bright morning sun and landed without a noise among the discarded 2x4s, broken wallboard, old carpet, shattered pieces of trim. This old microwave that heated everyone's food for, what was it? Was it 6 or 7 years? No one could remember for sure. No time for one more? Or? Okay. This is a poem called What I Like. And this title segues into the poem. What I like is when the lights are out in the house and I'm heading off to bed in my sock feet and I step on one of the boards in the floor and it gives a little. What I like is when I get a letter from somebody and can tell the person who sent it to me is a smoker because the envelope and the letter smell like stale smoke. What I like is to get some honey on my fingers, just a little bit, and not know it, and get it on something else, like a knife handle or a doorknob, and then have to try and figure out all the places I got honeyed up. And what I like is to run some warm water on a white dish rag and go around and wipe all the honey off all the things I got honey on. And what I like too is to open a new book and put it up to my face and flip the pages and smell the ink and paper smell come out of the book. And I like to check a book out of a library. Yay! Check a book out of a library and find a cigarette ash in it or a crumb or something, a crumb of something or a piece of snot. Maybe you're the one who left it there. I like to know that there are others living here doing the same things I am doing. I like to be in traffic, maybe right behind your truck, and smell the tinny stench of your exhaust. I like to know you are on your way and that I am following along behind, or maybe even am headed on my way too. I like to know that people are headed on their ways, even if they don't know where they're going. I like to be part of that. Even though it makes me almost want to blow chunks, I like to smell your bad breath because you are alive and you are talking to me. Oh sure, I like to smell the hyacinths in the grocery store. Somebody broke off that hang there like, well, broken hyacinths. What I like is that even someone's destructive urge or some dumb accident can't stop us from knowing we are alive. Thank you.